what would be an example of that? Obviously, we have the plans, so please explain that a little more.
Okay. Minimal essential coverage is what they call the plan that obviously employers with 100 plus in 2015 have to offer to their full-time equivalent employees. A lot of people may understand that more as the bronze health plan. I think we have it on the screen, the bronze health plan, and maybe a little far for you, but I'll explain what the bronze health plan is. The benefit plans for ACA or Affordable Care Act compliance start out with bronze, silver, gold, and platinum. The bronze being a 60% benefit level. 60% benefit level means the insurance company, wherever you're insured under with it, is going to pay 60% of the expenses. You're going to wind up paying 40% of the expenses, up to a maximum of this year, $6,600 is what it comes to as an individual, or $13,120 in regards to a family issue. Now, that is the minimal essential coverage, bronze. All the insurance companies, from Kaiser to HealthNet, United Healthcare, Anthem, Blue Cross, they all have to calculate their benefit plan that meets that requirement. There's a calculation that can be done to do that, but in doing that, that is the plan that meets the minimal essential coverage by the law. Now, that is the minimal. Now, an employer can offer that and then also offer additional benefits to the employee, which allows them to buy up to the richer benefit plan, such as the silver, which is a 70-30. As I mentioned earlier, 70% now is paid by the insurance company, 30% by you. Still the same maximum out of pocket. Then you go to the gold, which is an 80-20. A lot of us from when there was traditional PPO plans in the industry remember the old 80-20. The insurance company pays 80%, we pay 20%, up to a maximum of whatever the amount is, not to exceed that $6,600 that we talked about earlier. And then you have the platinum plan. Platinum is the richest benefit around. It's a 90-10. 90% of the cost, you pay 10%. Hopefully that helps you kind of understand the framework of where we're at with minimal essential coverage.
And obviously, you can always ask the insurers or benefits professional to what is that, and we'll be able to provide you guys with those different plans. So the next thing I want to talk about is affordability. Okay. So employees' share of the premium must be 9.5% or less of the employee's annual income. If it's 9.5% or more, it's not considered affordable for that employee. So how does that work?
The way I think of it, even just like a little broader perspective, is when the mandate says you need to offer coverage, right? Well, there's three aspects to that, and they kind of, especially if you're coming from outside the industry area, they kind of seem very similar. There's a category called minimal essential coverage, which Frank's just talked about. That's the type of coverage that's offered, right? And there's two other parts to it. There's minimum value, and then there's affordability. They're all different. Right? Minimal essential coverage is you got to offer somebody you have to at least offer a bronze plan. The insurance company should know it's minimal essential coverage. The other two aspects relate very similarly to affordability, but they're different parts of it. Minimum value, the way that I think of it, is what are the out-of-pocket expenses of the employee, right? You cannot be offering the greatest plan in the world that covers everything, but the out-of-pocket expenses exceeds 60%. That's basically what it says in the bronze plan. So that's what it means when you talk about minimum value. Affordability is the premium cost. What is the cost of the premium to the employee? And that cannot exceed 9.5% of annual household income. Now this can also be an area that's really tricky for employers, because how are they supposed to know whether or not it's affordable to an individual employee? They might know what the individual employee makes because they have their W-2s, but it's affordable as to the household. So how do you know if there's spouse work, if they have other sources of income, another job somewhere? So this can be a very tricky area for employers. And Frank and I worked on a case we can probably talk about. This is something that the government, the IRS, are very well aware of. So they've issued safe harbors for employers to make sure that, you know, to stay in an area of compliance in this area.
Great. And obviously that'd be a really good question to ask Amit, who's our tax expert. Okay, so what are some of those the safe harbors? So you were talking about these safe harbors. So basically, if an employer meets the requirements of any of these safe harbors, the offer of coverage will be deemed affordable for purposes of the employer's shared responsibility provisions, regardless of whether it was affordable to the employee for purposes of the premium tax credit. Okay? So how would we find that?
There's a W-2 safe harbor, there's a pay safe harbor, and the other one that I think is probably the most relevant, or a lot of this is going to see how it plays out, is the federal poverty line safe harbor, where the employer can use the federal poverty line as the base for determining whether or not coverage is affordable as to any individual. However, and you know, not to jump on what Frank might talk about, you know, he had an employer that was worried that somebody was just going to get, you know, he took the lowest income earner in the company and was worried because what, you know, that's not going to be, you know, how can I make something affordable for that employee? They don't make anything. Of course, it's not going to be affordable, right? This is where that, you know, safe harbor provision might come in handy. And again, you need to remember that employee, right, even if you do not offer them, and this might be a little bit confusing, please let me know if it is, that employee is not going to trigger a penalty for the employer unless that employee gets a premium tax credit, right? You have to get a premium tax credit. That's how the government is going to know, why am I paying? You should be paying, right? Now, if that employee is such a low income earner, they're going to probably qualify for Medi-Cal, right? Or some type of Medicaid provision, and therefore not be eligible for the premium tax credit, and therefore not make the employer liable.
To look at that, and that was great the way you described that, Darren. I'm looking at it. We're meeting with a lot of new employers every week that have these specific questions. Well, Frank, they say to me, how do I know? Well, the simplest way to do that is you have a DE9 or a DE6, which actually shows all your full-time employees and part-time employees that work for you. So you as an employer know what their W-2 income is. You don't even have to guess about it. You know what it is. Now, that being said, you can take that and multiply it by the provision of what full-time is, 30 more hours, and do the simple calculation of 9.56% of what the benefit is being offered, and you can come up with a very, very close number as to what that employee would need to pay in his monthly expenses not to exceed the 9.56%. And that's an area that a lot of employers are looking at and saying, okay, that's what I need to do moving forward. Reality of what happens is that you're taking one piece of the safe harbor provision and using it to put yourself in a position so that you show that your intent is to comply with the law. What we're seeing happening with a lot of employers, we did a case that was 311 employees the first of the year, and we used that very example that I just described you, and what happened was this. We didn't get a whole lot of participation, but what did we do? We put the employer in the position that he was in compliance with employer mandate, because the people that enrolled had been offered the coverage. If they declined, they took spousal coverage, or they were eligible for Medi-Cal, right? Or they flat declined and says, I'm not taking the coverage. But guess what? The employer had in their employee file, and has it today, the declination declined that they declined. Now you're shifting the responsibility from yourself as an employer to the employee. You know yourself as business owners. There's always going to be a handful of rogue employees. They're not going to comply, or they're not going to do whatever they have, and that's perfectly fine. but at least you're positioned as an employer that you got all your bases covered correctly.
And just to add to that, I mean, it goes back to the question you said before, it's like, what's gonna happen? And no one's really been penalized yet, so no one really knows what's gonna happen when an employee on their tax returns says that they qualify for a premium tax credit, then all of a sudden, the employer, right, gets a notice in the mail from the IRS, says that this employee filed a premium tax credit, show us information that you provided them affordable coverage. And this is where that letter comes in handy, like, well, we offered them premium coverage, we offered them affordable coverage. It met minimum essential coverage, it did meet minimum value, and it was affordable. The employee declined it. They can't go to the marketplace to get a premium tax credit, they should have got it through me. But again, we don't really know how that's gonna really play out until, people start getting penalized. But, like Frank said, once you have that declination, that employer is covered.
I wish Anna was here, but him and I have discussed some cases in regard to this, and I have two examples here of cases that the credit came back on. The way we can only imagine looking at it forward is this. Next year, employers are going to have to send in a form that says that they offered coverage and that these employees were offered and their social and everything is going to be on it. So that's going to have to be done when they file their taxes next year. Well, that being done, keep in mind that everybody that's getting Covered California or getting a credit or a subsidy, they're also getting the 1095A, right? I've got two of them right here, example, right? Having said that, guess what? The computers today were going to cross each other. When this Social Security for the 1099A lines up with this employee's Social Security, they're going to stop and say, oh, okay, there's the case right there. Now that's when we're going to see the penalty phase for employers that are out of the compliance on the employer mandate come to reality next year, because they're already setting up the technology, the documentation, to implement it as we move forward. Yes.
So there's obviously, there's transition happening, right? Things aren't happening overnight. We need to make sure that there's some relief to the employers to comply with the Affordable Care Act, and I think the government understands that. So some of the ones that we've already discussed, you said were the firms between the 50 and the 99 employees. They're not going to face any penalties until 2016, so make sure this year you're getting kind of on track with that, and then by 2016 there's probably not going to be any other excuses. And then offering coverage percentages from the 70% like it is this year to the 95% in 2016. So they're given a little time, a little transition period, but like they said, they don't really know what's happening. It's a case-by-case basis, I guess, where there's a case where the 1098 form was sent to an individual, and they have to provide proof that they were offered, the employer offered them a plan, and if not, I think on it was saying that they're going to have to pay that credit that they received every single month back to the IRS. So,
kind of add to what the 1095A means.
1095, excuse me.
Yeah, that's fine. Last year in August, I met with a medical group, doctor's office. They had a large number of employees. They knew that a lot of their employees had Covered California, but they were making more money than they should have been making to have Covered California. Make a long story short, we met with them, we discussed it, we went over the information, they told me what they was making. I did the simple calculation of 9.56, how much they're making as far as what they should have been making to get Covered California. And there were several of them that took the coverage, got off the Covered California for September 1st because their intent was they didn't want to have to pay back that money, they knew they owed it. Well, it came to roost. These are the forms on 2 of those people. So that's how they tracked it. Because that's going to be happening a lot now. So this is how that applied to the Covered California receiving credits that you shouldn't have been receiving credits on.
So there's 2 ways. Yes, sir.
Okay, what about the situation, why would more employers, say they have employees that with their job type, they would fall below the level to qualify for a subsidy. Would more employers change their plan document so that they don't offer the coverage to dependents, only to employees only? So that the families could qualify for the subsidy or the tax credit? Do you see a shift in that?
They, right now, employers with 100+ employees do not have to offer coverage to the spouse. They have to offer it to dependent children, okay? The difficulty where that lies is that if they're paying any portion towards the dependent coverage for spouse or children, it eliminates that dependent from going to Cover California and getting a credit or subsidy. That's a tremendous flaw in the ACA law, right there. So the only benefit that an employer can be doing